Hello and welcome, teachers. Let's talk about something we all see every single day in our classrooms, student errors. Do they mean we're doing something wrong? Or are they something else entirely? Today, we are diving deep into Unit 11 of the TKT Module 1 to see how we can reframe mistakes not as problems, but as really powerful tools for learning. And just so you know, everything we're about to cover comes straight from the Cambridge TKT course syllabus. So, mastering this unit, it isn't just helpful, it is absolutely essential for your exam. Okay, let's get into it. So let's kick things off with the big question. The one I think kind of keeps a lot of us teachers up at night. Are student errors a sign of failure? I mean, it's a totally natural worry, isn't it? You see a mistake and that little voice in your head goes, oh no, did I not teach this well enough? Or is my student just not getting it? Well, the TKT framework wants us to take that idea and flip it completely on its head. This right here is the core philosophy you need to get behind. Errors are signs of progress, not failure. Seriously, think of them like little windows into a learner's mind, showing us exactly what they're trying to figure out. The key takeaway? They're not failing, they're building. So, to guide us through all this, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to look at errors as data, then we'll break down the different types of mistakes, explore what causes them, talk about how to correct effectively, see how we can use errors to plan our lessons, and we'll wrap up with the absolute must-knows for the TKT exam. All right, let's jump right into our first section, errors as learning data. This is all about changing our mindset, from seeing errors as something bad that needs to be erased, to seeing them as, well, incredibly valuable information. So, what can an error really tell us? Turns out, a whole lot. It shows us what a learner already knows, what they kind of know, and exactly where the gaps are. It gives us this perfect little snapshot of their interlanguage, and you're going to want to remember that term, which tells us everything about their current developmental stage. It's basically a diagnostic tool for their learning journey. And this idea of interlanguage, wow. It is so powerful. It's the learner's own unique, constantly changing language system. You see, it's not their first language, and it's not quite the target language yet. It's this dynamic, kind of messy, but beautiful bridge right in between. And every single error they make is a clue telling us about the state of that bridge. Okay, so building on that, it is absolutely vital for the TKT exam that you understand this. Not all mistakes are created equal. We have to be able to tell the difference between three very specific types: slips, errors, and attempts. Let's break this down. A slip is just a momentary mistake, Maybe the student is tired or speaking too fast, and they can usually fix it themselves if you give them a little nudge. An error, though, that comes from a genuine lack of knowledge. They can't self-correct because they just don't know the rule yet. And then there's an attempt, and this one is my favorite. It's when a learner bravely tries to use language that's way beyond their current level. That's not something to punish. That's a sign of real ambition. So if errors are a sign that a student's knowledge isn't complete yet, where do they actually come from? Let's dig into the underlying causes, using the TKT's own terminology. Okay, so the TKT points to a few common sources for these errors. And while things like developmental stages and fossilization are definitely important, the two biggest ones you've got to know for the exam are L1 interference, that's the influence of a student's native language, and overgeneralization, which is when they take a new rule and apply it just a little too widely. Let's look at those two a bit closer. Here they are, side by side. L1 interference is when a rule from their first language just sneaks into their English. A classic example is a Spanish speaker saying, I have 20 years, instead of I am 20 years old. Overgeneralization is different. That's when they learn a shiny new English rule, like adding ed for past tense, and they get so excited they apply it to everything, giving you gems like comed or good. Honestly, this is a great sign. It shows they're learning the rule, they just haven't quite figured out the exceptions yet. All right, so we get what errors are and where they come from. Now for the really practical part. How do we, as teachers, actually respond to them effectively? Let's open up our toolkit. Now, this is a fundamental rule of error correction you have to remember. When you correct is just as important as how you correct. During an accuracy-focused activity like a grammar drill, you should probably correct right away to reinforce the right form. But during a fluency activity, like a conversation, it is so much better to just make a note and wait until the end. Why? Because jumping in can totally kill the flow of communication and really knock a student's confidence. So what does that correction actually look like in practice? Well, you've got several tools. You can recast it by simply saying their sentence back to them but correctly. You can try to elicit the answer with a guiding question, like, what's the past tense of go? You can use a clarification request to get them to rethink what they said, or you can give a metalinguistic clue by directly pointing to the grammar rule. The trick is to have a bunch of options and choose the right one for that specific moment. But listen, here is a word of caution, and it is a big one. Overcorrecting is a real danger. If a student feels like every single word that comes out of their mouth is going to be picked apart and corrected, they'll just stop taking risks. And language learning is all about taking risks. Our job is to create a safe space where they feel comfortable doing exactly that. Okay, now for what I think is the most powerful step of all, using errors to plan. This is where we close the loop. This is where we turn that data we've gathered from student mistakes into better, more targeted lessons for the future. By really looking at the errors your students are making, you can figure out exactly where they are on their learning journey. This means you can stop guessing and start planning lessons that address their actual problem areas. This leads to way more effective feedback, and in the end, it helps your students become more aware and more in control of their own learning. And look how simple this can be. A student says, "She don't like apples." You hear it and you make a quick note. Then, for your next class, you plan a quick 5-minute mini lesson all about using does and doesn't for the third person. And that's it. The error directly shaped your teaching. It's responsive, it's targeted, and it is incredibly effective. All right, we've gone through the theory and the practice. Now let's zero in on exactly what you need to have down cold for Unit 11 on that TKT exam. Okay, here's your final checklist. You absolutely must know the difference between slips, errors, and attempts. You have to be able to spot an example of L1 interference versus overgeneralization. You need to understand when to correct for accuracy versus fluency and know which correction techniques are right for which situations. Remember, the exam will test your ability to apply these concepts, not just define them. So, as we wrap things up, let's just come back to this one central idea. Every error is a step forward. It's a sign that your students are trying, they're experimenting, and they're building their own unique path to fluency. So see their mistakes not as problems you have to fix, but as opportunities to teach. I mean, what if the most common error in your class is actually the key to your best lesson next week?